Hello, it is Friday, February 20th, 2026, and today is the third day of Lent. And this morning I got up and did my hour meditation, and this was definitely the easiest of the 3 days so far. I locked in for about 35 minutes, and then basically I opened my eyes and looked at the clock or the timer at when there was 25 minutes left and then when there was 10 minutes left. So in between those times I was pretty in it, and then the last 10 minutes were definitely like hard to get back in it. So I just kind of sat there and let it be, what it is. And then I recorded this week's episodes or next week's episodes of Poets and Saints, and then went to Pony Coffee and edited those. Sat at Pony until a little after 1, I think. And yeah. And then came home. And then I went on a long walk. It's pretty chilly today, but the sun's out, so with my Carhartt jacket on, it wasn't too bad. My ears are definitely cold. But I walked for hour and a half or so, 2 hours, probably close to hour and a half. But I did have a 54-minute conversation with ChatGPT. I haven't used the voice model in a while, and I actually don't even know if I've used the voice model with 5.0. Is that what we're at? 5.2. So I don't think I've actually used the 5.2 voice, and it is much, much improved. It's so much better at just like giving its answer succinctly, and then just listening, and it interrupts way less than my previous. I don't know what model I had previously tried out, but it was just so bad at interrupting. If I pause for thought and try to find the right words quite a bit. And so while I was trying to talk with ChatGPT, it would just constantly be interrupting me, trying, just not letting me form a complete sentence. I even tried for a long time of like creating a do not respond until I say I'm done. And it'd be like, of course, I will wait I'll wait for you to say I'm done before I speak next. And then I would say one sentence and have a 0.5 second pause, and it'd be like, well, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this model was I had almost an hour long conversation, and didn't get frustrated with the tool. But I had a good conversation though, or a good research. Basically, it's the way that I started using it, and the way that I used it was just essentially voice Googling, voice research. And so while I was walking, I was curious if Eastern Orthodox practice Lent. And so I asked Siri, and it popped up. It didn't tell me. It just like popped up on screen, a little thing. And I was like, okay. And I got my answer because I saw when it popped up that it said yes, but they call it Great Lent. But it like went away. And so I didn't get the more explanations. So I just opened ChatGPT and did a voice search of, do Eastern Orthodox practice Lent, and ultimately yes, but it's the calendar. Their calendar is a little bit different, but is similar. They do practice Lent. It's called Great Lent, and they do not do Ash Wednesday. They do their Lent starts on a Monday, and I forget what they call that Monday, but all very similar. And then was just kept asking questions of just learning, like, okay, so both Eastern and Western traditions practice Lent. So when did Lent start? Because obviously it started before the schism, or they both wouldn't practice it. And it started essentially like with the early church in the first few centuries. They were practicing Lent together. I don't know if it was called Lent, but they were practicing Lent together. And then that just got me curious about the Great Schism and the Protestant Reformation, and which traditions practice Lent. And so the church, the early church, practiced Lent, and then there's the schism of East and West. They both still practice Lent, but then the West had the Protestant Reformation, which birthed the I guess it didn't birth the Catholic Church. It birthed the label or the moniker, the Roman Catholic Church, to differentiate. And then there are many Protestant traditions that do practice Lent, like Anglican. What was it? Anglican, Presbyterian, and what's it called? Methodist, and there was one more that is like very much, it's a part of their Christian calendar. And then there's all of the splits of the splits of the splits. I mean, it's like I grew up in the Assemblies of God denomination, and we were so far from practicing anything that was traditional, that it was like tradition was held, it was looked down upon. And it was like even communion was like a once a year special event of Communion Sunday. And Lent was a Catholic thing, and all of that. Like I don't even know if I had heard of Lent growing up. Like it wasn't even that it was an argument of like, oh, we don't do Lent, that's a Catholic thing. It was like, didn't even know to ask that question. But yeah, I just kept asking curious questions. And then that made me think, because this is something interesting. This year, Lent, Chinese New Year, and Ramadan, the Muslim, it's not Muslim Lent, but it's a Muslim holiday that is fasting. And so it's 3 major cultural events all fell in the same few days. And it was the first time that had happened in like 150 plus years. I don't remember the exact number. And it will not happen again until 2189. And I remember that because I was born in 1989. And so literally 200 years after my birth is whenever it's going to happen again. And so even if I was to live it to be a centurion, which I would gladly accept as long as I'm not like decrepit and dementia out or something. I would love to live to a healthy 100. That would be awesome. Even if I did live to a healthy 100, the next time that this happens would still be 100 years after I'm dead. And that also made me think early, like that. I just love thinking about time scales and how, 100 years is a long time. It's a whole human. It's longer than a human life, but some humans do live to 100, and within 100 years, there can be easily you can have four generations of family in there, and a lot, like technologically, it's like the industrial revolution happening only a couple hundred years ago, the technological revolution happening in my literal lifetime, and now had an hour-long conversation with a computer using my voice, and it understood me immediately and answered me immediately with reliable answers. And so that's, it's just insane. The the fact that I geek out on it all the time, but it's like you can't see them, but the cameras I have behind me that are mini DV tapes, and I forget what they're not mini VHS, compact VHS tapes, and mini DV tapes, and high 8 tapes, and all just tapes in general that in my lifetime, in my archive, we start with, I was fortunate enough to be born whenever home camcorders were affordable to the lower middle class, because in my family, my grandpa owned a VHS camcorder, a full-size VHS went into it. You held it on your shoulder, but that footage exists. And if it would have been any time before that, you would have had to have had a 16 millimeter or 8 millimeter or Super 8 film camera, and most of those without sound, and most people could not afford the film, the developing, all that. But I was born in 1989 and just happened to be lucky enough that my family, my extended family, owned a VHS video camera, which then basically kept a tradition or an interest in getting the newest cameras and filming, which it's like I'm getting on a tangent, just trying to think about time scale and how much happens in 100 years, but how 100 years is a blip of time. If you're talking about in the Common Era, we are 2026 years into the Common Era, which 100 years is what does that make it? 1%? 2%? Okay. I'm not good at mental math. But we have 10 millennia, 10 centuries in a millennia, and we've lived, or the common era has 2 millennia, and so 1/20th I don't know how to make that a percent. 1/20th. I'm sure it's super easy. It would be a 0.5%, right? Because 1/10 would be, would that be 10%? So it'd be 5%. I know I could look it up, but I think it'd be 5%, not a 0.5%, but 5%. Okay, now let's confirm. We'll ask ChatGPT since it's up. 1/20 is how much percent? It's thinking hard, so yeah, 5%. Okay, so the way you do the math is it did the math by doing 1 divided by 20 times 100. So 1/20th, you do 1 divided by 20, and then times that by 100 to get the percent. Interesting. Yeah, I was not a star student in the mathematics department. Okay, so what I was getting at is even in the just the common era, which 100 years is only 5% of the common era. Then you're talking in the common era of 2,000 years is a even smaller of a blip whenever you're talking, well, let's say human history of 70,000 years. Not humans have existed for longer than that. Since the cognitive revolution of 70,000 years ago, since prehistory. So history, human history, prehistoric humans have existed, but modern humans have existed for 70,000 years. And I'll confirm that. So Homo sapiens emerged roughly 300,000 years ago, but like behavioral modernity refer to around 70,000 years ago. So I've heard. I want to confirm something. So I've heard before 70,000 years ago. That's prehistoric humans. It's literally prehistory. We don't have history. We have geological records and all that stuff. But I'm saying like the cognitive revolution and art and all those things. I just want to form a question of, okay, so history starts even, so everything before 3200 BCE is prehistoric. So about 5,000 to 5,500 years ago, that's when history starts. History being that it was written down. So just thinking about timescales of 100 years is so long and so much happens, and yet it's a life one, and a blip in the only 5% of the common era. Then in history, we're talking 5,500 years. And so I kind of want to do the math on what percentage 100 years is of. So if it's 5% of 2,000, that means it's 2.5% of 4,000. I'm guessing. I think that would be right. 2.5% of 4,000. And then we add another 1,000. And so would that just be 2%? Let's say roughly, instead of doing the math, we'll say that 100 years is roughly 2% of history. Then 70,000 years whenever Homo sapiens, the human form that I am, that we are, we have looked basically like this and had the cognitive abilities, the same basic cognitive abilities for 70,000 years. And how long that is in comparison to 100 years. Then 300,000 years of people who are Homo sapiens, the DNA of us, that we look same, like 10 phalanges, the whole thing. And that is just Homo sapiens. 300,000 years. Let's see. What percent is 100 of 300,000? I'm sure that's easy math too if I knew how to do it. Okay, so the way you do it is 100 divided by 300,000 times 100, which is 0.03% of Homo sapiens existing. Then 300,000 is just Homo sapiens existing. And then you want to zoom out 3.8 billion years, and the scale gets to, so it would be 100 divided by 3.8 billion. That's about 2.6 millionths of 1%. It's an almost immeasurably small fraction. An almost immeasurably small fraction is my life. If I was to live to 100, it's even smaller than that, in practical terms. But an immeasurably small fraction in the course of the history of the universe is my life, is 100 years. And yet, the amount of things that have happened in my 36 years, let alone in the last 100 years. It's crazy to zoom in and crazy to zoom out. And progress and change is, it's compounding. The amount of time it took, 300,000 years, up until 70,000 years ago, for the progress of the human mind to evolve to the point to be able to tell stories and craft meaning, and potentially in that moment it was consciousness, instead of the animalistic. The deer just knows that it's hungry or thirsty or in danger. It isn't cognitively, consciously aware of its own existence and mortality. It is a biological response to protect its life, but it isn't a free will choice. It has to protect its life. Humans 70,000 years ago evolved to consciousness to be able to tell stories to one another, to be able to gather in groups larger than 100 people. Now we can gather in group of the amount of time it took for us to get there, and then 70,000 years, 65,000 years before we were able to create the story of written language in order to be able to write it down. And then within the last 5,500 years, the amount of change that happens, agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, and technological revolution, to today, to me talking to myself on this camera, it's just wild, and time is insane. And I was just thinking about all of that because the next Ramadan, Lent, and Chinese New Year will not happen together within the same couple days, until 2189, 200 years after I was born. That's Friday, February 20th. See you later.